as I was saying, very happy that you guys keep showing up. And I understand that you're not doing it for me. So that's good. Although if you ever need motivation, like I don't really want to show up, you can always say, yeah, but Kevin really needs me, because I do actually need you guys. So it'd be really boring to be staring at a blank screen, talking to myself. I mean, I do that anyway, but yeah, not the staring at the blank screen part, but the talking to myself part. I do that. So let's meditate together, settling into a nice, comfortable and stable meditation posture. Oh, great. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the chat now, people. Yes, it's 1 p.m. Okay. Yes. Just settling. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And letting the attention arrive in the body. Really starting with just connecting with yourself. The body we take for granted so much. We just expect it to move us around, do what we want it to do, without paying it a lot of attention. So to give it some loving attention this morning. The breath moving, enlivening, cleansing. The heart, that patient, reliable organ, maintaining the flow of blood through the body. The nervous system, transmitting information throughout all the senses, the mental formations, all powered by this electrical energy in the body. And consciousness allows us to just feel it all, to be aware of it all, to know that it's happening. Perhaps to enjoy it, to enjoy just the feeling of life. Letting the shoulders release and the stomach soften. even while maintaining an upright and balanced posture. If need be, it can be a prone posture if being upright is difficult. The point is to be awake and aware, attentive. We can start to focus more specifically on the breath. You can feel the breath at the nostrils as touch sensation, or the movement in the belly or chest. For most people, the thing that they consider a challenge in meditation is the thoughts that appear persistently. We want to take an attitude of acceptance towards thoughts, though, not a conflict or adversarial relationship. Thoughts are natural, they come and go. If we look carefully at our experience, we'll often find that it's not the thoughts themselves, but our reaction to the thought, or the emotion that's driving the thought, that's really unpleasant. And again here, bringing acceptance to the experience is the key to the release. But that acceptance involves turning toward letting the feelings in, letting go of the fear and resistance. And this is perhaps the greatest challenge of practice, really one of the great challenges of life, to just feel, whether we are enjoying that feeling or not. returning to the breath. This becomes our anchor to the present moment. And the breath helps us to open the body and open the mind. We connect the breath to our experience. Breathing with sensations, breathing with feelings, breathing with mental experiences, mental formations, thoughts, constructions, breathing with wisdom. The breath is a doorway to insight into impermanence. It embodies impermanence, constant change. right. There may be some external noises. Olive is out and barking. And then there's someone upstairs in my house talking on the phone. So I said that I sort of had the thought for this, to talk about this topic as I was sitting this morning. And well, there's someone who must have gotten ejected. We'll let them in. And I've been mentioning this multiple times, that I've been reading and studying and writing about the Anapanasati Sutta, the early Buddhist teaching on mindfulness with breathing. And you know, it's a striking sutta, because it's sort of something that you think you should know. Like, I've been meditating with the breath for a while now. I must know how to be mindful of the breath. But the sutta takes you into maybe some places that are a little surprising. So it has 16 different steps that are divided into four sections. They are called tetrads, so groups of four. And so the first section is about body, mindfulness of the body. The second one is about feelings and calming the mind, calming mental formations, it calls. And then the third part is about mind and mind states. And then the last step in that third section says, each of the steps says, breathing in, I do this. Breathing out, I do that. And so, or I do the same thing. So it's breathing in, I'm aware of joy. Breathing out, I'm aware of joy. Breathing in, I'm aware of the whole mind. Breathing out, I'm aware of the whole mind. So step 12 is breathing in, liberating the mind. Breathing out, liberating the mind. And it sounds like a big step. It sounds like, you sort of, I felt the need to really, and I have been in this whole process, reading some of the real authorities on this sutta and on Dharma. So Venerable Analayo and Thich Nhat Hanh and Buddhadasa and others. And very interesting, and a great project for just seeing the contrasting interpretations, and realizing that these authorities have contrasting interpretations of the meaning of this fairly simple sutta. To me, kind of helps me to feel maybe a little more confident in my own exploration, that they don't know exactly what things mean, or that there are different ways of understanding it. So, yeah. So this idea, liberating the mind, sometime when I first got to it, I thought, geez, does that mean I'm enlightened now? And why are there 4 more steps? If my mind is liberated, shouldn't that be the end of the whole thing? And my mind is not liberated from irritation of the neighbor's dog barking. So there you go. There's the door opening, so something else will happen now. Okay, so what occurred to me this morning, I recalled an essay, one of my favorite essays from Bhikkhu Bodhi, called The Taste of Freedom. And it occurred to me that, this might be a good reference for my thinking about this step, because it happens that that's the step that I'm writing about right now, the liberating the mind step. So this essay is from a collection just called Dhamma Reflections, collected essays of Bhikkhu Bodhi. And these were essays that he wrote for the Buddhist Publication Society, and says it was compiled by the Buddhist Publication Society to celebrate his 70th birthday. Well, that was 2016, this says. So I guess that means that he's 76 now. So if you don't know who Bhikkhu Bodhi is, he's one of the great scholars of early Buddhism. Has done translations, extensive translations of the Pali Canon, and he's an American monk who ordained and lived in Sri Lanka for quite a long time. He's back in the US now, living in upstate New York. So, and this happens to be the first essay in this collection. So it was, this, I believe, was chronological. So, so I assume this was one of the earlier things that he wrote back probably in the late 70s. So in it, let's get to it. He starts out by talking about the idea of freedom and how in our culture, particularly in the West, but really it's a global idea to an extent, the idea of freedom is tied up with things you can do and what he calls license. So, and he's saying that, you know, this ideal of, you know, freedom, which is very common in America, right? It's really wrapped up in a lot of our cultural and historical ideas and view of what America represents. That this idea of freedom being able to do things or to have things or to control things. The key word here being things. Is in fact not freedom. And he says, so he says, but the Buddha offers this teaching that he says will lead to freedom. And so people are intrigued by it, but often surprised to discover that it involves a lot of discipline. He says, his language is somewhat dense. Let me see. When people first encounter the Dharma, they often find themselves confronted at the outset by one particular feature which, clashing with their familiar modes of thought, strikes them intellectually as a contradiction and emotionally as a stumbling block. This is the fact that the Dhamma purports to be a pathway to liberation, teaching pervaded throughout by the taste of freedom. It yet requires from its followers the practice of a regimen that seems the very antithesis of freedom, a regimen built upon discipline, restraint, and self-control. On the one hand, we seek freedom, our contemporaries object, and on the other, we are told to reach this freedom, our deeds, words, and thoughts must be curbed and controlled. So he says the solution to this seeming paradox lies in the distinction between two kinds of freedom, between freedom as license and freedom as spiritual autonomy. So he then takes this and in a wonderful set of images and analogies, he shows us how this works. So he tells us sort of, it's not a story, but he gives these examples, imagining if you were in prison and tied down that if you then were freed from prison and released and could go back into having an ordinary middle-class life, that at first you would think you were free, but soon enough you would realize that, well, you're not really free because you don't have all this power and prestige. And so, but if you got all this power and prestige, then you would maybe think you were free, but ultimately you would not be, because even if you are, as he suggests, a world ruling monarch, you are still subjected to the imprisonment of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so he says, outwardly, one may be a ruler over the world, over all the world, but in the court of consciousness, one is still a prisoner. In terms of license, one may be completely free, but in terms of spiritual autonomy, one remains a victim of bondage in its most desperate form, bondage to the workings of a defiled mind. Spiritual freedom, as the opposite of this condition of bondage, must therefore mean freedom from lust, hatred, and delusion. Which really just resonates so much for me. And I hope it does for you too. When we look at the world and we look at people in the world who have tremendous power, it's so interesting to look on them as people who are imprisoned by greed, hatred, and delusion. And in fact, it's striking that the people who attain the most power are often the people who are driven by the most powerful elements of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so, despite the fact that they seem to be on top of the world, they are in fact at the bottom. They're the ones least free in this fundamental sense, in this spiritual sense. So in this practice of the Anapanasati Sutta, I think what's helpful about this is that liberating the mind doesn't have to be some ultimate experience. Lovely, if that can happen. And when we get there, great. To be liberated permanently from greed, hatred, and delusion. But what I think we're doing in the sutta, when it says breathing in, liberating the mind, breathing out, liberating the mind, what we're saying is that in this moment, I can let go of greed, hatred, and delusion. And certainly anybody who has practiced meditation to any serious degree has had moments like this, has had moments when they just feel at peace, not driven by anything, not caught in anything, just peaceful. And it's a simple state. And yet it's a, stunning and powerful, inspiring experience to touch that and to see that. In one sense, it's not that complicated, liberating the mind. It takes effort and work, but it's not some lofty state. As with many of the teachings of Buddhism, it's about letting go. It's not about acquiring something, getting nirvana, whatever that would mean, getting enlightenment, It's when we're just not caught in those tendencies. That's a moment of liberation. And I find this really, it gives me a lot of confidence, both in the practice, in the Dharma, and in myself, because it helps me to realize that, this seemingly lofty teaching is not really beyond me. It's actually quite accessible to me. And I've been there. I've touched it. So the problem then for us, and we experience this in our practice regularly, is to keep letting go. Our this imprisonment is a self-imprisonment. It's something that we have signed up for, just like addiction, and we see that those habits are deeply embedded in us. Now, it's one thing to overcome an addiction, and particularly with drugs and alcohol. Abstinence isn't so complicated because it's letting go of this external behavior and this external object that that drugs or the alcohol, the thing. There are other addictions, food and sex particularly, that are more internal and create other challenges. But when we talk about greed, hatred, and delusion as addictions, then we're getting down to something almost primal, because desire and craving are built into our DNA as survival forces. And the problem with them, as it is with addiction, but really even on the lesser mind states of lust or desire, craving, is that there is a certain need, survival need, evolutionary need, to act on desires, on hunger, on thirst, on fatigue. And it's easy for those desires to go from I need food to I need sugar, I need flour, I need whatever, the craving is that I need a chocolate bar. And all of a sudden it's not just, a physical need. Now it's verged over into a craving, an addictive craving. And unless we are very disciplined, and this, as Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about in the beginning of this piece, unless we, really exercise restraint, we can easily cross that line, and probably most of us do regularly cross that line. And the same with aversion, that being careful of avoiding harm involves aversion, right? Like, oh, I don't want to get hurt. I want to be careful. I don't want to bite into the moldy bread. I guess on the food thing here, food is a bit of an issue when you don't have any teeth. But and so it serves again a survival function, aversion, but it also builds into our whole judgmental and attitudes and anger and resentment, and again can cross a line from the useful protective aversion into the harmful destructive aversion. And I would say that the Eightfold Path, and particularly precepts, the guidelines, are there to help us to distinguish these from between the desires that are necessary, the healthy desires, the healthy aversions, from the unhealthy. And in fact, this is why the monastic life is designed the way it is. It is designed to protect the monks and nuns from acting on and playing out their greed, hatred, and delusion. Because they have so many rules that they are reminded in external ways not to act in these ways, and that then redounds into their inner life and acts as a mindfulness bell for them. So many of us lay people as well use these kinds of mindfulness bells to notice, oh, this is an unwholesome place to go. And, and simply restraint, such as not purchasing foods that we know are addictive for us, and, the various, not going to websites that we know are going to be addictive for us. And so these kinds of restraint that we use to free ourselves. And it's a very interesting idea, isn't it? That true freedom requires actual restraint. It requires limits, which is, true in the political realm as well, but some people don't seem to believe that. So I hope that's helpful. It's actually really helpful for me right now. It's like, I'm like, yeah, that's good. I need to remember that, because it really is. It's like these teachings, it's just easy to kind of find yourself getting kind of slippery with Dharma teachings. It's again why we come together, why we study the Dharma, why we practice, to keep reminding ourselves, because our minds and our habitual behaviors and thoughts and feelings will draw us back into those underlying tendencies. We really have to, this phrase, keep coming back, is such a key one, because, we keep coming back to meetings. It's something we say in 12-step meetings, keep coming back for the same reason, because, it's like, why do you go to all those meetings? Well, that there's one of those silly aphorisms about alcoholism. The ism is incredibly short memory, and that's perfect. Exactly right. That's why we have to keep coming back. We have an incredibly short memory. And as a meditator, of course, we say keep coming back as well, right? Keep coming back to the breath. But we're implying, and the larger point is keep coming back to the Dharma, to the truth, to remembering what is really true. And so just being here on Tuesday morning, is like keep coming back. And so for us all to remember together what is true, and to be free, to be liberated, at least for a moment, try to take that with us. So I'll open it up now for any thoughts or questions anyone has.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
Thank you for the retreat. It was wonderful. It was my very first retreat ever. It was a great experience. So
on
thank
Sunday
you.
You're talking about with
Yes.
Vimalasar?
Yes.
Oh, good. So
something came up for me during that, and I don't know if I'll even understand it if I read it or go back to my notes, but the whole concept of letting go and letting be, if you could speak to that. It's come up in the recovery rooms, and I thought that was a really interesting concept, because I see it as sitting with, letting be, but how are those two kind of the same thing, and how are they different, and what are your thoughts on that for for meditation and, for recovery?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dana. Thank you. So I'll start by saying that, the term letting go kind of is the common one, right? That everybody's familiar with, and it's sort of not just a meditation phrase. It's something that people say in ordinary language, and I'm actually curious how long that's been a common phrase in English language. I don't know whether it's something that's been around for a long time or whether it's relatively modern. I really only became significantly aware of it when I started to practice meditation. And it just was started to be something that I heard repeatedly from my teachers. What I think happened over time, because part of what you're talking about actually is the evolution of teaching meditation, the way people have found different ways to in different language and different ways of characterizing the process. I think at a certain point, people started to struggle a bit or question a bit how it was that you let go. Because although it's a good image, when it comes down to the reality of letting go of a thought, there is no mechanics that you can operate in the same way that I can let go of my teacup. Letting go is actually a metaphor. It's not a description of an actual thing you can do, because there is no physical thing going on. And so what some people started to realize is that what might be more helpful, because then as people heard that phrase, people would have a struggle with, how do I do this? How do I let go? And it became like a tension, where instead of something that's supposed to be easeful, just letting go, it became, oh, I can't let go. What do I do? How do I do that? And so the first person I remember hearing this from was Howie Cohn, a spirit rock teacher, and it was probably around 25 or 30 years ago at a day long at Spirit Rock. And I remember him saying, oh, you may just let be. And what he's saying is, so there's no mechanics involved here. There's nothing you actually have to do. You just don't what? Don't continue to do. That's not even quite it, right? Don't try to fix it. If you leave it alone and stop bothering yourself, then your mind will naturally settle. Just it's like you sit back and you go, wow, there's all this stuff going on in my mind. How do I stop it? It's the same question. There's no active way that you can engage in stopping your mind. It's that you stop engaging with the stuff. And that, again, is, that's less of a metaphor, but the meaning of it is that we have what's involved, I should say, the mechanics of it is that we have to figure out for ourselves. We have to tune in and start to develop a subtle awareness of the mechanics of what's going on. We start to see, oh, right, there is this tension, there's this efforting, or there's this wanting, or there's this resistance. And we start to tune into those more subtle things. And then we find that there is a way to release. there is a way to let go, but it's not mechanical. It's very subtle. There's actually a physical element to it. There's an emotional element to it. And there's what we could call a mental element to it. But all of these are intertwined in a way that it can't be really uh, unraveled and can't really be explained with words, can only be known through in experiential process. It's why you have to sit. It's why people go on retreats, because the longer you sit, the more, if you sit and meditate day after day after day, your awareness becomes more subtle, and you start to pick up the subtleties of the process, and then you start to be able to tune in to doing it.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much. It's why you have to sit.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's definitely always been a major tension for me. Like, yeah, how do I do that? So just do nothing.
I know it's ridiculous, but golf provides some guidance here. And around putting, okay? Putting is the simplest thing to do in golf because there's no swing. It's not hard to hit the ball. It doesn't have to go far. And the club is basically a flat surface. So there isn't even any loft on it. You just have to go like this. And yet people struggle with putting because they try to figure it out. They try to think about it. And it's actually just something where so you look at the green and the ball and the hole, and your mind actually solves the problem, because there are two basic things you have to figure out in a putt: how hard to hit it and in what direction to hit it. We call it the line, right? Because the greens are not flat, most of them. So the ball is going to curve in a certain way. And you can go around and look and analyze it to your heart's content. But my belief and my experience is that my eyes process it. And I don't have to actually think about it. I can see it. And if I just allow that sight to come through, there's a feeling, there's a connection, and it goes, and then your hands, you just stroke it. And I see so many people struggle with this because they're trying to solve it mentally, but it's not really a mental experience. So just like meditation, you can't solve meditating mentally. Like, you can read all the books in the world, right? Okay, I'm going to read this book right before I meditate, and then when I meditate, I'll know what to do. No way. Now you just filled your mind up with a bunch of stuff that's just going to show up when you meditate, just going to make it harder. So this intuitive practice, it's why meditation is more of an art than a science, right? I would also say putting is more of an art than a science, but we can. So yeah, I mean, I sort of took the whole question period for that. If there is another one, Julie, hi. I have to get out and play golf this afternoon anyway, so I can't stay too long.
I will try not to take up too much.
That's okay.
Good morning, Kevin. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for your wonderful teaching. Yeah, letting go is a really is hard for me, and I like to be remembered, and I like to be reminded, and I'm often reminded that renunciation and restraint are really about freedom and not about deprivation.
Right.
And to keep orienting my mind toward that is always a very helpful reminder. So thank you very much for that. I also wanted to say, Rick Hansen, I meditate often to what he teaches, which is let in, let be, let go. And
Yeah. Good.
that helps me. But also, I was taught something really wonderful in the last few years about letting go that I find very helpful. And that is, instead of conceptualizing letting go as this, to conceptualize it like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a releasing of the grasping.
Yeah.
It's not about getting rid of.
Uh-huh.
I
Good.
found that very helpful. And one other piece I'll just say quickly is, for me, it's also about not boarding the train, right? So
Mhm.
it's not
Right.
like we have to stop the train. The train is coming, the thought is coming, and just letting it go by. Because once you hop on the train, then you have to worry about getting off the train. Which destination? Do you have to wait till get off while it's still going? And there's all that about, you know, once you engage with the train. If I can just let, and it's not easy, but if I can, because the train says it's going to this wonderful place and I want to get there, and I can get there faster if I'm on the train. But the trick, that the gift for me is learning how to let the train pass by and not engage, not get on, and
Yeah.
let the train pass. So thank you for letting me share.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie. Yeah. I mean, the last thing I'll say is, you know, this idea of restraint and renunciation, the key is the middle way. And we each have to find what that means for us. You know, I think the idea of harm reduction, you know, can sometimes be a really helpful one in that regard, you know. But like anything else, I mean, abstinence, harm reduction, any of these can be done in a skillful way or an unskillful way, and it's really up to us to be careful. And you know, we check with wise people. It's what the Buddha says to do. Check with a wise person. You know, for us, each of us individually, to determine what's the middle way. Our minds, I don't think, are so good at figuring that out. So we look at the Dharma, we look at the teachings, to our teachers, to our sponsors, to our therapists, to our partners, to our friends. You know, this is called Sangha. So delightful. So nice to see you all this morning. I'm probably going to get back on the Burning Desire track Friday night. That's officially where I am, but I'm allowing myself to take some side trips when called upon. This is, you know, it's all Dharma. So very nice to see everyone. Thank you. Blessings. Take care.